Mercedes is having a very bad season at the moment. They are a close second place with only 4 points between them and Ferrari in the standings, and massively behind Red Bull with a 430 point gap. It's definitely a big drop from the team's astronomical highs. We must not forget that just 3 years ago, Mercedes built one of the fastest cars in Formula 1 history. Unfortunately, since the introduction of the new rules for the 2022 season, they have fallen behind and are starting to make a greater number of operational mistakes. So, what happened to Mercedes and how can they improve? Mercedes is used to dominating the sport. Since 2014 they have won 7 drivers' titles and 8 constructors' titles. The last one in 2021 with a rather controversial ending. In any case, with the introductions of the new rules they had big ambitions again and came up with a car that looked completely different to all others. Perhaps the most noticeable difference was the so-called zero-pod side pods on the side of the car. The goal of this concept was to have as much of the car's floor exposed as possible, which was theoretically supposed to create more downforce. If the W13 worked, it would be one of the fastest cars on the grid, at least according to Mercedes simulations. However, at the first race of the season, Mercedes realized that something was wrong. The car suffered from porpoising on the straights and a bunch of other problems. Mercedes has spent essentially the entire 2022 season trying to understand their new car and unlock the potential the simulations told them it had. In the end, they succeeded, winning both the sprint and the main race in Brazil. In retrospect, this win turned out to be more of a Pyrrhic victory, as it convinced them to continue with the zero-pod concept, which is why they brought a modified version of it to this season. Once again, it turned out that others have beaten them. Even their customer team Aston Martin was ahead of them. It turned out that even though they cured a lot of W13's problems, it exposed a lot of others. So Toto Wolff decided to completely change the concept of the car after qualifying in Bahrain. So they started a complete redesign of the car, and in Monaco they brought a big upgrade in which they got rid of the zero sign pods, modified the floor and the front suspension. In the past few races, things started to look dangerously close to last season. Hamilton finished second behind Verstappen in both USA and Mexico, although he was disqualified from Austin due to too much wear on the legality plank underneath the car. This gave the team some optimism that the new upgrades that they brought to Austin were working as they should, and it looked like the team would have a very solid race in Brazil. But that's exactly what didn't happen. The W14 was slow on the straights all weekend and it degraded his tires horribly, which was one of the better qualities of the Mercedes car all season long. The team had obviously made a mistake with the setup of the car and didn't want to risk another disqualification like in Austin. Mercedes, even in normal races, is kind of slow on Friday, and only on Saturday it's able to find the right setup for the car. This weakness is only multiplied when you have only 1 hour to set everything up and then you are not allowed to touch the car anymore. Mercedes just chose the wrong setup and the car was too high, causing all of these problems. But that's not Mercedes' only problem. They are also starting to make a greater number of strategic mistakes and lag behind in communications with the drivers. This was most evident in Brazil when Russell wanted to swap position with Hamilton and his engineer Riccardo Mosconi replied that they are still discussing. That almost sounds like Ferrari. No! They also had problems with communications between the drivers in Spain when they collided during qualifying. And perhaps the worst incident came in Qatar when Hamilton was thrown out of the race by Russell on the first lap. It's true that Russell was innocent in this incident and Hamilton was solely to blame for it, for which he also apologized. But if Russell and Hamilton are colliding now, you can only even imagine what will happen if they have a car capable of fighting for championships. I'm afraid that the fight between Hamilton and Rosberg will be repeated again, and it will be damn difficult for the team management to rein them in. They sometimes also make quite strange decisions in terms of their race strategies. For example, instead of just copying Verstappen in Austin, who was struggling and had relatively slow pace, they made the race too difficult for themselves at the end with a complicated strategy. Although it had worked in the past, as it was the exact same strategy as Spain 2021, this time they didn't have the car fast enough to beat Red Bull. If they had just copied Verstappen, I think the chance of winning would be greater. Mercedes faces many challenges, and this happens to every team in every sport that dominates for so long. Important people will leave and others will catch up to you because it's always easier to catch up than to lead. Over the last few years, Mercedes has lost a large number of important people in the leadership positions. Aston Martin took a lot of them, Red Bull also stole people from HPP, James Vowles left his position as head of the strategy and joined Williams as a team boss, and Mike Elliott left the company completely. These changes have affected Mercedes, and while they have certainly recruited new people and James Allison has returned as the technical director, the team has still lost a lot of experience and know-how overall. It's also worth mentioning the pit stops. DHL is doing the championship for the fastest pit stops, and Mercedes is lagging far behind in this area. They are only 7th in this championship and they don't have a single pit stop this year that comes close to 2 seconds. Meanwhile, teams like Red Bull, McLaren and even Ferrari regularly made stops around 2 seconds, and McLaren even holds a new world record for 1.8 seconds. So, how do they get out of this situation? Well, Niki Lauda once said that from losing he always learned more than out of winning, and I think Mercedes needs to remember that. Realistically speaking, they can forget about winning the championship this year. Even if they bring a better car next year, I still feel the combination of Red Bull and Verstappen will be better. They definitely need to work on their pit stops and communications between drivers and the team. Otherwise, they still have the facilities, the financial resources and 2 great drivers. There has also been a speculation recently that Mercedes is several months ahead of other manufacturers in production of the new engines for 2026. It's hard to say if they can maintain this lead, but if it is even true, if they can get the aerodynamics and chassis of the car together along with their pit stop and strategy, Mercedes could rise up again to the top. Well, that's it for today's videos. I hope you liked it. You can subscribe and watch this video of Aston Martin disappearance or this video. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you again next week. So, bye!